Bueno, buenas tardes, bienvenidos todos. Good afternoon, welcome everyone. Thank you, Alexine, for being here with us. We have already 62 people willing to listen to you. Alexine is a great human being. She is a marriage and family therapist trained in the US who practices as a psychologist and as couple therapist in her natal country that is Switzerland. She is also an EFT trainer and the community coordinator for French speaking Switzerland. And she has been working along with another psychologist on attention deficit disorder. And she will be sharing with us for this hour and a half. I don't want to take more time from her to be with us. So welcome, Alexine. It's very nice to have you here. I know Alexine from a little long ago. I met her in Spain, and I'm really happy to have her with us.
Thank you, Norma. I'm really happy to be here. It's an honor, and it's a little intimidating to see so many of you. I understand some Spanish because I speak French and I learned Italian and I traveled in Central America when I was younger, but I can't speak it. So I'm going to show you my slides. I'm going to try to teach from the Spanish slides, but from time to time you'll see me looking this way. That's when I'm lost in the Spanish slide and I need to look at my English slides. And I'm also going to change my glasses, which are horrible because there's they're my reading glasses, but like I can't see you right now. So I'm going to do that and then you can't see my eyes, but until I get new glasses, that's the situation. So as Norma, so I'm going to share my slides first of all. This one.
Los nuestros. Sí, métete aquí abajo.
Okay. So I want to start by saying that I usually teach this material with my colleague Ben Knoibüller. We make a great team because we complement each other really well. So there are parts of what I'm going to talk about that I'm less of an expert at, and he is more the expert. So I may not be able to answer all the questions when it comes to those parts. But basically, my story with ADHD is that I am married to someone. I've been married to someone for 26 years that has ADHD and was diagnosed later in life, only in the last 8 years, I would say. And so those questions about how does EFT work with a couple that is impacted by ADHD? How does it work to turn to your partner and say, will you be there for me when sometimes they're not because they forgot or they're distracted or they're not reliable? And so it's I guess it's been out of my own pain and my own growth with my husband that I developed this interest. And Ben has another story which he can tell which he talks about when we teach the class together, but he has also a lot more experience in his clinic assessing people for ADHD and doing groups for ADHD clients, which I don't. What my clinical story with it is that I started recognizing the dynamic in my couples because I was experiencing it at home. And then I started reading about it and learning a lot about it, and basically just learning with my couples how to work with it as I also worked on my relationship. And I'm I just want to express my gratitude to my husband who lets me talk very freely about that and give multiple examples. So before I talk to you about theory, I wanted to show you a little clip that Norma subtitled so that you get a sense of what it's like to have ADHD. And I'm sure some of you here present have ADHD, or you're in a relationship with someone who has ADHD. And I think that it's important in EFT, we want to keep our stance, our non-pathologizing stance. But we also want to take seriously the struggles that can be there. So I really like this video because it gives a broad picture of what it's like.
I asked people with ADHD one question. What do you want the world to know about your ADHD?
This is what I want you to know about my ADHD. It takes me a lot of hard work to get my work turned in on time. I'm very smart, but my grades drop sometimes.
If I could actually sit down and start my homework, I would. But many days I just can't, and struggling with something so seemingly simple tends to make me feel very frustrated or even stupid.
I'd like the world to know that there are people like me out there who get good grades, rarely get in trouble, and yet can and do have ADHD and struggle with the symptoms that come along with it.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it isn't there.
My ADHD affects every aspect of my life, from sleep to school to work, all of my relationships, and I have to tailor my entire life around having it.
It doesn't always look the same. I was only diagnosed at 25 because I have the inattentive type.
I'm basically hyperactive. I was diagnosed at the age of 7.
I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 38, so I always thought you need to be hyperactive to have it.
I've filmed this video too many times now, and I can't get it right, and it's really stressing me out now.
I try really hard, and it hurts when people act like I'm not trying as hard as I am.
But the worst part is when my symptoms aren't taken as symptoms, they're taken as behaviors, done intentionally to upset someone, or considered that I don't care, and that's never been the case.
Whenever you think that I intentionally tried to hurt you, I didn't. I probably just screwed up.
I'm at least as frustrated as you, and probably even more.
When I say I forgot, I'm not lazy. I'm not just trying to make an excuse. It's a real struggle. And I'm probably even more pissed off at myself than you are at me.
There is a giant flipping war going on inside this head. I really am trying.
When I use my accommodations, it's not me trying to take the easy way out. All I'm trying to do is level the playing field so that you and I have a lot more even chance of success.
When you see me arranging my pens and pencils according to color, it's because my brain is trying to compensate for the chaos within.
I squeeze some Play-Doh in my hand and help me concentrate on what I'm doing.
I moved to a special spot in the classroom for tests because I can't block out noises and distractions like you can.
While I'm staring off into space, it doesn't mean I'm stupid.
It doesn't mean that I'm not listening to you.
Normally it means that you've triggered a really interesting thought which my impulsive brain can't help but chase.
Having ADHD is like having a billion trampolines in your head, each representing a thought, and your brain just jumping off each and every one every second.
I don't think about ADHD as a disorder. I take it as more of a different way of thinking.
I know my brain works differently, but ADHD can give me an advantage with what I'm doing.
It may take me a while to come to a solution. It tends to be really different than everybody else's, and a lot of people appreciate that.
I've been told my whole life I need to be fighting my brain. I'm learning now that I need to love and work with my brain.
It's not an excuse, it's an explanation, and it's something that I'm going to continue working on for the rest of my life, and that's okay.
I'm smart, but ADHD makes focusing hard and hides my capabilities. If I'm given the chance, I can achieve more.
To meet this amazing community and learn more about how to support them, please visit howtoadhd.com/howtohelp. Please share.
Also, sticky notes. Yay!
So when we do a 2-day class, of course, we have time to discuss in the chat room, but I think today is not, we'll have hopefully some time at the end for questions and comments. I just want to highlight a few things that were said. If you think I'm doing something intentionally, I'm probably not. I just screwed up, right? Or it's not a disorder, it's a different way of thinking. I find that very important to remember. There's a lot of strength there are a lot of strengths that come with ADHD or ADD. It's not just a struggle. And really, I think what I want you to come away with is with maybe a little bit of a better understanding of what it means to have ADHD, how the brain functions differently, and how to help partners view it as a difference between them. Right? I like to say that they are just divergent from each other. Their brains are just wired differently. However, we don't want to pathologize, but the diagnosis for us feels important because when you can diagnose, you can give it a reason, right? There's a reason for those behaviors, and that can bring a lot of relief and also a lot of a direction to take in order to get help when there's a struggle. So just a few definitions about ADHD. So it's one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders of childhood. We see it between 3 to 10% of children, but we also know that it's underdiagnosed. And I was reading today that in France, they estimate that there is one child in every class who has ADHD, and that thousands of children are not diagnosed. They go under the radar. It often lasts into adulthood in 50% of the cases, according to a study by Sibley et al. And there is a prevalence in the general population of 2.5 to 2.8%. It's known that it's twice as prevalent in men than in women, but actually that's based on diagnosis. And what we know is that women often are better at masking and therefore get underdiagnosed. And sometimes that diagnosis comes later on in life, often during menopause, because there's a link between estrogen production and the synthesis of dopamine. And so that's when everything kind of falls apart and they can't mask anymore. And then that becomes obvious when their whole life they were good at, they had strategies to mask. So ADHD can be characterized by a deficit in attention and distractibility, impulsiveness, and hyperactivity. And there are three types, and you either have the predominantly inattentive presentation where it's hard to organize or finish a task, it's hard to pay attention to details, or to follow instructions or conversations. And the person can be easily distracted or forget details or daily routines. With the predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation, the person fidgets and talks a lot. It's hard to sit still for long. In smaller children, you see the hyperactivity as a physical hyperactivity, but in adults, the hyperactivity can be mental, where there's just a lot. It's nonstop, thoughts going all over the map, and it's less visible, right? The person might be restless or have trouble with impulsivity. Someone who's impulsive might interrupt a lot or grab things from people or speak at inappropriate times. Or it's hard to wait for your turn to speak and things like that. And there's less, there can be problems with emotional regulation. And then when you have the combined presentation, you have symptoms from both presentations. Because symptoms can over time. Oh, there's an echo. I'm gonna mute some people.
Please.
Because symptoms can change over time, the presentation may change over time as well. So you may be very impulsive in childhood, and then maybe lose that trait in adulthood and be more the inattentive type. A lot of adult ADHD don't know they have it. And in my practice, most of the couples I've worked with were undiagnosed couples. And I was like, I think there's something else at play here. And I would bring it up, and then they would go and get tested, and turned out they had ADHD. Some of the manifestations of ADHD, or I've just mentioned them in the slide before, but there can be a difficulty planning ahead, prioritizing, a difficulty focusing on a task during a long time, problems multitasking, although sometimes that's also a strength, an ability to multitask, impulsiveness, let me see what those words mean. Yes, hot temper, restlessness, frequent mood swings also is something that we can observe, low tolerance for frustration, etc. I'm not going to read all of them. And ADHD is usually diagnosed when symptoms are severe enough to cause ongoing problems in more than one area of life. And usually these problems can be traced back to early childhood. But not always. Sometimes it's like people don't ever think of that because they were good students. They were able to focus. They didn't have any problems. They went under the radar. And so they imagine that ADHD means you're hyperactive and you're bouncing off the walls. And that's not always the presentation. You probably know that already, but ADHD is a disorder of the executive function of the brain. And so that means that people who struggle with executive skills, the idea is that it's like you have an orchestra. I like this metaphor. You have an orchestra. You have all the instruments. They're all there. But there's no conductor. And so they're not coordinating. They're not working together. And it can be really messy. And so you have to bring in a conductor, right? You have to bring in some compensating strategies or medication to help bring harmony in the functioning of the brain, and in particular the executive functioning. So people who struggle with that may have trouble starting or completing a task, or they have difficulty prioritizing. They forget what they just heard or what they just read. They struggle with working memory, so that can mean remembering a detail while you're working on the task, or remembering all the steps to follow a task. They can get overly emotional and fixate on things. They can struggle with being flexible and changing from one task to the next. Trouble managing their times, all sorts of things that the executive function allows you to do normally. Briefly about the brain. So basically, noradrenaline and dopamine are the hormones that modulate the functions of our prefrontal cortex. And it is known that in the ADHD brain, there are less receptors for dopamine. And so what that means, dopamine is the neurotransmitter that's part of the reward system of the brain, right? So you do something rewarding, you do something fun, and you get a hit of dopamine, and it feels good. It feels rewarding. And when you have less receptors for dopamine, you have to flood your brain with more dopamine in order to feel the effect. So that explains why it can be really hard to focus on tasks that are not immediately rewarding. And that's why it's easier to focus on tasks that are super interesting for you, or that are challenging, or that are new, because it gives you that dopamine. Or like working under a deadline when you have an exam the next day, and suddenly there's a lot of adrenaline and stress hormones, and it helps you stay on track. It's stimulating. So some experts say that ADHD is a dysregulation of the reward system of the brain. And you can see a lot of people that will be just pleasure seeking, right? And that's why these people are fun too. They're really fun because they're always up for the next adventure and new things and new interests and new passions. But that can be hard to keep up for the partner. So of course, medication can help with that. But it's not always necessary. And the best kind of treatment is the kind of treatment that is comprehensive, where you have those 4 pillars. First of all, it's important to treat other mental disorders because there's a high co-occurrence of depression, bipolar, anxiety. There can also be, it's not uncommon to have other neurodivergence like autism, like high sensitivity, like in Switzerland we call it high potential. I don't know if it's basically people who are gifted and they have a high IQ, but that also comes with a whole way of functioning that's really not neurotypical. So it's important to be aware of that, and if there's anxiety, depression, bipolar, to treat that first, and then tackle the ADHD. And then what helps with ADHD is psychoeducation. It's super important to understand how your brain works, why you do the things you do, what your brain needs. And after this slide, I will go into understanding some of those aspects. So educating yourself when you have ADHD, and also us as EFT therapists, I think it's important to bring in that psychoeducation into our sessions to make sense of some of the action tendencies, which are actually not action tendencies, they're symptoms, right? And so I know some people don't like to use the word symptoms because it's very pathologizing, but we could say it's an expression of ADHD, and it's not necessarily an action tendency, something I'm doing in response to a trigger. It's just my brain expressing itself in a different way. So psychoeducation is super important. Coaching means you're gonna get help with developing lifestyle strategies. How to not forget your wallet or your keys every time you leave the house, how to prioritize your tasks, how to organize your agenda, how to make sure that you remember the important things, how to not get distracted, etc. So a coach, ADHD coach, can be really important to implement some of those strategies. And then psychotherapy is what we do, right? Because having ADHD or finding out that you have ADHD can have an impact emotionally, and it's about learning to live with that, accept yourself, celebrate the gifts, manage your relationships. And pharmacotherapy is the medication, which for some can really have the effect of putting on a pair of glasses and suddenly seeing clearly. And then, of course, social support and self-help groups are really important. And that's what Ben does, where people, group therapy, right? People connect together and they brainstorm on tasks of daily life, problems, how to solve that. They can benefit from each other's experience. They're super creative. So they can find solutions together, and I think it makes you feel less alone and a sense of belonging, and that there are other people who are wired like you. And of course, exercising, sports, sleep are super important as well. Our brain is plastic, there's plasticity, so thankfully we can modulate all that, and sports, exercise, and sleep are huge parts of having a positive hygiene when you have ADHD. Well, for anybody, but when you have ADHD, it's particularly important. So I wanted to go over some of the symptoms, right? Because if we don't know ADHD really well, we might think, oh, it's a disorder of, it's a deficit of attention. But that's not a very good name for it, because it's not true. And actually, my husband, for years, I was like, I'm pretty sure you have ADHD. And he'd be like, no, I don't. I can read a book for hours. I can focus for hours on some things. And it's true. And until I heard about hyperfocus. And then I was like, oh, okay. That makes sense. Maybe you do have ADHD. And so it's better to say that it's an inconsistency in attention, right? That sometimes I can focus for hours, and usually that's when something is interesting to me. Usually that's when something grabs my attention. But when something is not interesting, when something does not reward my brain, and it's boring, and it's not stimulating, then I get distracted. Then it's really, really hard to focus. So it's important to understand it is not an inability to focus. It is not constant distractibility. It's more related to that dopamine. So that means you can also implement strategies so that something can be interesting, or if it's not too long and there's a reward that comes afterwards. Scheduling boring tasks before something rewarding so that you have something to look forward to, etc. The other element is speed. And a metaphor, so everything can happen really fast in the ADHD brain, right? Different things can happen fast. The way information is apprehended, the way emotions happen to the person. So, for example, with the way that information is apprehended, I will get back to that later, but a metaphor could be that Ned Hallowell uses is that it's like driving in the rain really fast with no windshield scraper. Right? And so you have all this rain coming at you and you're really fast, and all this information comes and you don't have time to process it or organize it or prioritize it. Everything is all there all at once, and it can be really, really overwhelming. And also it means that there's low impulse control, and the image that is helpful here is to the one of a Ferrari with bicycle brakes. Right? I have a client, I mean, I think it's also from Ned Hallowell, but a client told me that one day. She said, I don't have the brakes. I don't have the brakes emotionally. So I avoid, when I feel anxious and when I feel this hyperactivity inside of me and this anxiety, I try to keep busy, because if I go to my partner at that moment, I'm worried I'm going to slam my Ferrari into her, like I'm going to hurt her with my words, with my actions, because I can't find the brakes, right? And so we'll get back to that in a moment when we talk about emotions, but that can be a real struggle. Relationship to time, that's a big one. I think that's a big one in couples that I see also. For many years, I never understood. Well, I learned that when my husband told me, oh, I'll be back in 20 minutes, I learned to multiply that by 4. As that image says, where I'm 5 minutes away, and where they really are is a million light years away. And it's going to take them much longer to come home. So I can't tell you how many times I've been worried and anxious, and where are you and what's going on? And of course, he's unreachable because he's turned his phone off and he's completely lost in the moment somewhere with someone and has lost all notion of time. And it's as if I don't exist, like I'm out of sight, out of mind. And for a long time, I took it very personally, and I would say, how come I'm not, it's like I don't exist in your mind. How is that possible? You're always in my mind. I always think of you and the impact on you. Why can't you? Why don't you? Right? And this was really helpful for me to read about and to understand, is that my way of perceiving time is on a continuum, and I'm constantly kind of aware of the past and of what's coming, the future, and the present. And I can hold these time frames at the same time in my mind. And often for people who have ADHD, they don't. It's very different. It's like they live in 2 time zones. There's the now and the not now. And so when something is not now, for example, it's in the past, it's like it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't need to think about it. I mean, it's not that I don't need to think about it. I don't think about it, right? And if something is not yet, well, then why? It's like the brain says, why worry about it? It's not here yet. So the strength of these people is that they can be very good at living in the present moment, and also bouncing back really quickly. If like I'm a planner, I anticipate things. I think about things ahead of time, way ahead of time. If we host a dinner, we're used to hosting large dinners for friends and for different contexts. And I can think of the menu and the napkins and all of that like 2 months beforehand, right? Or planning a birthday party. My husband shows up the day of. He's like, so who's coming? And what are we doing for drinks? Right? I envy him sometimes. But at the same time, there's been situations where I imagined that what was obvious for me was obvious for him, and I didn't communicate it clearly. Can you please take care of this and that? And we're at the dinner, and there's no wine or no drinks. And he figures it out. He figures it out in the moment. And that's a strength. And that's probably also because they're used to not having anticipated and doing things under pressure last minute, but they're really good at finding solutions in real time. So one thing that is needed for this difference of apprehending time is reminders, lists, writing things down, charts, etc. It takes a lot of work to make it work. And sometimes these things go unnoticed in the relationship until there are kids in the picture. And then when you have kids, you need to plan, you need to be organized. And then what you see is one of the partners will take the bulk of the mental load, and that will be too much. Because it requires organizational abilities. So that can create a lot of frustration in the relationship. But knowing this about the ADHD brain, I think helped me a lot, because then I realized, so if he doesn't anticipate and I do, if I'm expecting him to anticipate as well, I need to make that explicit. I need to say, and with Ben, we have this saying like, now, you need to do it now. Because if I say you need to do it now, and my husband says, but it's not yet, it's in 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, it's in 2 weeks, but in order for it to be ready, like taxes, for example, in order for it to be ready by the deadline in 2 weeks, you need to do this and that now, like right now. And so I call that putting the subtitles, right? He's not in my head, I'm not in his. And I need to constantly remember, and that's the work I have to do, that if I want things to be done a certain way, if I want us to be a team, if I need his help, I have to put the subtitles, because he's never gonna think the way that I do, and I'm never gonna think the way that he does, right? So that's one thing that I work on with the couples. The reward system of the brain, I've talked about it, but when there's less dopamine, more stimulation is needed. And so it can be hard to finish what they started, or to start something that's not immediately gratifying. So it's like the stick, you need to, either they need a carrot, like the reward, or they need a stick, the pressure behind them. Another thing is how they apprehend information. So like I said, with the driving in the rain, right, with no windshield scraper, you have, it can feel like can feel overwhelming. And what happens is that the ADHD brain doesn't always, there's no hierarchy. So you come home from work, the dog needs to be walked, the baby's crying, your wife is trying to make dinner and she's overwhelmed because she has a toddler that needs her. And there's there's a pile of mail that needs reading, and you don't know where to start. It's not necessarily obvious like what's more important. So you might choose to go walk the dog, or you might choose to do the mail when actually the baby needs crying and needs to be changed, and your wife is making dinner, right? Or your husband. So we call it a flat brain, and Melissa Orlops calls it a flat brain. It's like everything enters at the same level and there's no natural hierarchy. And so that means knowing where to start or what to pick first can be complicated. And it's almost like you have the information in your brain, you have all the books, but there's no filing system. And so when you need to use an information so that you can make a choice, so that you can complete a task, you don't know how to find the book, and you get flooded and you get overwhelmed. And so it's like a noisy flat brain because everything comes at the same level, but noisy because there is all that information, right, happening all at once. And it's like listening to the radio station with a lot of static, and you have to strain to really hear like what's going on and what's important.
Recording in progress.
Emotions. So there's so much that could be said about that, but I don't know all these words, and I need to remember here. Yes, flash emotions. So remember no breaks, difficulty regulating emotions, difficulty with impulsivity, and so the ADHD brain can be surprised by their own emotions. Emotions can appear like that. Suddenly you get triggered. Suddenly you're furious, angry, or really hurt. And you can be blindsided by your own emotions and having no time to react or process or reflect or think or feel what's happening. And then you might lash out, express that without any filter. Right? So that can cause problems at work, of course, with your partner. What you can see in the relationship is someone who has really difficulty regulating emotions and can go really high, really fast. And then 5 minutes later, they're fine because they moved on to something else. Well, meanwhile, the partner is like shaking, terrified by that strong reactions and needs hours or days to get over it. So that's also something to remember, like there are no breaks. So when we work in EFT, when we work with Move 2, or we slow it way down and we look at all the elements of emotion and we help them become more aware of what's happening in the body, we're helping putting the brakes on, right? We're helping them recognize the signals and maybe help each other slow down in moments where those flash emotions can happen. Another thing that's important to know is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So this is a sensitivity to rejection, a hypersensitivity to rejection that you will see a lot. And when you pair that with difficulty regulating emotion, that can be tricky in your sessions. Even I have clients that have ADHD where I feel like I need to be really careful what I say. I need to be really careful how I say it, because they could, as soon as they feel, if they feel pathologized, if they feel like we're seeing them as the problem or anything like that, I'm losing them, right? So that's something that you see, and that's something that you can also understand in the context of when you grow up with ADHD. Imagine the number of, and it's undiagnosed, especially when it's undiagnosed. Imagine the number of negative messages that you receive from your family, the teachers, right? And on average, I think, I can't remember age 12, by age 12 or by, I can't remember, you receive on average 20,000 more negative messages than someone who's neurotypical. So you can understand the impact that this has on the view of self, and how sensitive, raw spots you can develop within. So let's talk about the impact on the relationship. So this is a conversation that I've had many times with my husband. I'm like, are you listening? And then he's like, yeah. And I go, what did I just say? And he can't tell me what I just said because he wasn't there. So now I've learned to recognize the signals. And sometimes I shut down because I'm like, forget it. But remember, it can be so hard, right? To stay focused, to not get distracted. And then you try to mask that because it's uncomfortable to admit that, yeah, you know what, I zoned out. It's interesting. I have a client right now who has ADHD, and I see him individually, and I zone out so much when I'm with him. It's fascinating. I'm like, well, that's what it must feel like. I think I struggle because he's all in his head, he's all over the map. And so I've told him that. I said, when you're all in your head and I can't feel you, I completely zone out, right? And I think there's some parallel process happening also. So it can be really difficult not to take it personally as well. So let's look at what happens at the beginning of the relationship, right? At the beginning, it's wonderful because your brain is high on dopamine, right? Or the ADHD brain is high on dopamine. It's novelty, it's interesting, it's stimulating, right? It's exciting. So the courtship can feel amazing. And the feeling is so intense that you tell yourself, oh, this person has to be the perfect soulmate, right? And it's almost like self-medication for the brain, which, for the non-ADHD partner, if you hear that, you're like, oh, thanks, great. Like, that's what I am to you, your medication. But I think it's important to keep in mind that it has nothing to do with the feelings of the person. It's just the chemistry of the brain, right? We know that the ADHD brain functions well when things are interesting, when things are novel, and when things are challenging, right? And at the beginning of the relationship, all of that is present, okay? And then it becomes kind of normal. It becomes familiar. There's routine. And then it's not the person loses interest, but the brain does, right? And so all these amazing courtship behaviors may disappear, and the person may turn to a different hobby or a new interest, or may not treat you the way that they used to treat you in the beginning, and you can feel really let down as a non-ADHD partner, right? And this is something that you will hear that I started recognizing in the discourse of my non-ADHD clients, saying things like, you used to do all this for me. You used to be there for me. What changed? What happened? What happened? You used to move mountains for me. And you're saying, if I really want something, I can move mountains. So why can't you move a mountain for me anymore? If I tell you it's important for me, why can't you move my mountain, right? And there's this sense of like confusion and betrayal and feeling let down that you can observe in the non-ADHD partner. And this can really, that's where sometimes doing a little bit of psychoeducation can be helpful. And I try to do my psychoeducation in an evocative way. We all know in EFT, we can do psychoed, but we try not to do too much of it, and we try to kind of weave it and slip it in there and don't make it too long, and right. So I like to, I don't like to pause and give a lesson on the brain, but I like to say, oh, so it sounds like in the beginning, everything was new, everything was exciting, everything was challenging, and it sounds like your brain was thriving on that. And that makes sense, right? Because there's so much dopamine when things are new and when things are challenging and interesting. And that also, I also get that when the relationship becomes safe, becomes comfortable, becomes familiar, it's almost like your brain is not getting enough dopamine, and then you start looking for that somewhere else. But help me understand. Am I getting this right? Like, it doesn't mean your partner is no longer interesting. It doesn't mean you don't love them anymore, right? This is more of a brain thing. This is more of a need for stimulation that is wired within you. This is what we talked about in the beginning, right? Something like that. So I try to weave in my reflections, I try to weave a little bit of psychology. Okay. So when you look at the cycle in EFT, we always look for the trigger, right? What starts this? How did the fight start? How did it all start? What did you do? What did you feel? What did you say? And so one thing that can be tricky, and we need to be careful with that, is that often when ADHD is present, the trigger will be one of the symptoms, one of the manifestations of ADHD. So for example, I asked you to go grocery shopping. I told you to bring me, well, there's a scene from a movie that I show in my Hold Me Tight where Jennifer Aniston, Brooke and Gary, right, from the breakup. She says, I sent you to the store and I asked you to bring me 12 lemons and you only brought me 3, right? And so basically, that means you forgot, right? You forgot what I told you. You're not reliable. I can't count on you. And all these symptoms or these manifestations can be the beginning of a big cycle, a big fight. And so what you will see is that the non-ADHD partner will attribute meaning to a symptom, right? And they will take it personally. So when you're distracted, what I tell myself is, oh, I'm not important enough for you. I'm invisible. I'm not interesting enough for you. You don't care enough about me, right? Or when you're disorganized, I'm not important to you because organization matters to me, but you don't make an effort. Makes me think of my husband's closet, for example. I like it to be kind of organized. I fold the laundry, I fold everything. I even put stickers, like these are the t-shirts, the jeans. And it lasts a week at most, and then it's like an explosion in there. And so it used to drive me completely nuts. And now I still don't like it. I still feel sometimes like, hey, I'm taking time to organize and put things nicely so you can easily find it. And when I see that you make no efforts and you just go in there quickly and mindlessly, I don't feel respected. But I can say it like that, right? Versus like, you don't care, you're disrespectful. Because I understand that he's not going to remember. It's not important to him. And he's in the moment. He quickly needs something. And he's not going to take, there's too much going on, right? So it helps me depersonalize it. Hyperactivity can really feel for the partner that I'm not enough for you, right? You always need something else, a new challenge, a new activity, a new hobby. Aren't you happy with me? Am I not enough for you? Impulsiveness, you don't respect me, right? You always interrupt me, or you blow up at me out of the blue. I don't even know what I did or what I said. And forgetfulness is I'm not important for you, right? What I tell you is not important enough for you to remember, right? And so when we give these meanings to the symptoms, we're really not understanding that it's a symptom, right? That is not something that is done on purpose. It is not something that is personal. It is the way that the ADHD brain functions. However, it doesn't mean we just have to accept, and it is like it is, because those symptoms have an impact. Of course they have an impact. And you will hear in your couples a lot of pain, a lot of rage, a lot of anger from non-ADHD partners, but also a lot of pain. Where are you? Do you see me? Do you respect me? Am I important to you? Right? And it can be really painful to not be taken care of the way that you are taking care of the other person, the way that you're thinking about them. The other thing is the ADHD partner will often be perceived as rude when they interrupt, or as mean when they get quickly angry, or lazy because they don't follow through or finish a task. And you saw in the first video, it hurts when you think I'm lazy, because I'm not. Like ADHD people who have ADHD, they try so hard. They have to work harder at everything. So it's not laziness. It's really not laziness. It's a real struggle and difficulty. They can be also perceived as antisocial or emotionally crippled, are withdrawers, right? Who are avoiding. I mean, the cycle is not pleasant. It's not stimulating. It's not dopamine producing. So some people will really try to just avoid all of that and withdraw and shut down and numb those feelings, just like a withdrawer, right? It can just be even more intense. Or they can be perceived as stupid because they can't think ahead. Something so obvious and they didn't even think about it. And how could you not think about it, right? And clueless because you're not very efficient, or you're not seeing the obvious, right? So there's the ADHD part, the non-ADHD partner, coming from their confusion. And like I know I spent years pulling my hair out and telling my husband, help me understand. How did you not think of that? Because it was so obvious to me. And when you don't know that you're just wired differently, you look at your partner and you go, are you crazy? Are you stupid? Right? Because it makes no sense. So I have to say that Melissa Orloff's book, The ADHD Effect on Marriage, was a revelation for me. It was, I felt super seen and validated, but also felt so touched and so much empathy for my husband. And I realized, oh my gosh, I have made it so much worse. By not knowing that there was a real struggle, by not understanding that it was absolutely not his fault, not his intention. And by getting angry and by criticizing and by judging, I have made it so much worse, right? And one of the realizations, and this is something that you will see, I am pretty sure, in all of your ADHD clients, is that there was a lot of shame underneath. But when your ADHD client is a withdrawer or even a pursuer, you may not see that, right? It may be well hidden. So on the surface, right, you have maybe a lot of defensiveness and reactivity, or you have denial, defensiveness, paralysis, like they go numb, they go quiet, they don't know what to say, they feel inadequate. It's whatever I say, whatever I do is never good enough, right? We know that. And they just try to disconnect from the feeling and they avoid, they detach, right? But inside, if you explore a little bit the primary emotions, you will see, okay, they feel stupid. Like we see that in our withdrawers, but they feel like a failure. We see that. We're used to that. They feel guilty, but they feel ashamed and anxious And those two things, ashamed and anxious, are almost always there. Ashamed because even they themselves, especially, right, especially when they haven't been diagnosed and they don't understand what's going on themselves, there is a part of them that thinks, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do the things that normal people can do it? Why can't I do it? And even when they have been diagnosed, they can still say that about themselves. And the anxiety comes from, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess up again. I know I'm going to mess up. I must not forget. I must do this right. But how do I not mess up? And so there can be performance anxiety, which then makes them paralyzed, right? And then they don't do things that would be obviously making it better for the relationship. I had a client who needed to go see the doctor to rule out some conditions, so that to reassure his wife, and also so that their relationship would be better. And he wouldn't pick up the phone. And when we explored what is blocking you, I mean, you could do this one simple thing and it would make everything better for her. Why aren't you doing it? And he said, well, if I do it and even that doesn't resolve my condition, then what am I left with? Then I can't fix it, right? And so that can be paralyzing, the sense of no matter what, there's always going to be, I can't change my brain. So what if I call the psychiatrist and I go take the medication and it doesn't help, right? So this anxiety of I can't fix it, I can't change it, can really, can be well hidden, but can really paralyze them and makes it look like, come on, like it's just one phone call, make the appointment. Why aren't you doing it, right? So it's important to really stay and to really know, okay, there's anxiety, there's shame. I need to, of course, we go slowly, but I need to keep that in mind and I need to make space for that. The non-ADHD partner, of course, they feel alone, invisible, forgotten, unimportant. And often the presentation is they're angry. They're really angry, critical. They can be also very full of disdain and mocking their partner, infantilizing. Right? You often see the parent-child dynamic that comes into play, where the non-ADHD partner has had to pick up the slack, compensate, and they become the parent in the relationship. And because their partner is not reliable, because they forget, then they say, okay, I'll just do it and I'll do it myself. And then they end up doing everything and they end up feeling burnt out and really angry. And also, they sometimes will tell you, but I tried to say it nicely. I did say it nicely. I did write it in the calendar and I even put an alarm on their phone. And when even that doesn't work, then I freak out, then I scream, and then I get the attention, right? Why? Because that's the stick. That's the stick. That's not a carrot, but that's the stick. Pressure. Oh my gosh. My partner is really upset. They're going to leave me. Okay. And then you have an ADHD partner that does the thing they were supposed to do, but it usually doesn't last, right? And so you have a fatigue from the non-ADHD partner that says, why do I have to yell in order to be heard? And then you will see a lot of burnt out pursuers that when you ask them to trust the process, to trust the vulnerability, to trust the intention and the efforts, they're like, yeah, no. How do I know this is going to last? Right? So those are typical elements of a cycle that's impacted by ADHD, but that's one cycle, right? I'm sure there can be other, like pursue, two ADHD partners. So this is the more typical pursue, withdraw one. Time is flying by. Okay, so attachment fears. Well, I think we've said some of that, right? But what you will see often from a non-ADHD partner feels unimportant for their partner, or invisible, or forgettable. Not important. Yeah, I'm not important. I'm not worth the effort. You're not reliable. Melissa Orloff says, reliably unreliable, right? I can rely on one thing, is that you're not going to be reliable, which is terrible. But they also feel like, oh, maybe I'm too demanding, and I'm becoming a witch, right? I don't like this version of me. I'm just always angry. And the ADHD partner, their attachment fears are going to be, you don't admire me anymore. And that's true. It's hard to admire someone that's not reliable, right? You don't appreciate me. I'm inadequate. I'm incapable. I'll never measure up. And you'll end up leaving me for someone better, right? And you don't accept me as I am. And if you have someone that has a lot of emotional dysregulation, one of the fears can also be, I'm too much for you. My emotions, my intensity, my passions, my hyperactivity, that's too much for you. So I'm not going to read that. Those are I'm not going to read them because they're in Spanish. Oh, I could read them in English, but I prefer to keep some time for questions. But basically, you will hear protests, and you will hear defensiveness from different partners, right? And I think it's important to reframe in terms of attachment. So when you have a non-ADHD partner that's protesting, such as, how many times do I have to tell you things? I mean, I text you, I tell you, I email you, I write it down on Post-its, you tell me okay, and then you forget, right? What their protest is really saying is, will you be there for me? Can I count on you? Can I lean on you and trust that you will hold me, or hold this for me? Or can I trust that this new focus you're giving me, or will this be short-lived again? Is this change something that will last? Right? And then when you have a non-ADHD partner that withdraws, their withdrawal in terms of attachment says something like, I'm disillusioned. Sorry, that's the non-ADHD partner that withdraws. Their withdrawal says, I'm disillusioned. You say you care, but until when? Will it really last? I'm so tired and discouraged. I've lost faith in you. I need to protect myself. In order to stay in this relationship, I need to protect myself, right? If I don't do that, if I keep hoping and you let me down again, this could be fatal for us. So I'm withdrawing, I'm detaching so that I can stay with you, right? And that's really important to remember that when you see a burnt out pursuer, with when there's ADHD or not, I think that's a good reframe to have. I'm doing that, I'm protecting myself. That's the only way I've found to stay in this relationship. The ADHD partner's withdrawal might say, I'm so afraid of messing up again. I keep disappointing you, and each time I try, I fail. You do it better than me, so why bother? And when the ADHD partner is protesting, what their protest might be saying is something like, won't you love me and accept me as I am? Can't you see how hard I'm trying? Please don't be another person that sees me as a failure. Please see me for who I am. Do you love me? Do you see me? Can you respect me and accept me as I am? So what do we do differently in EFT? What I've learned is that I didn't learn in my EFT trainings, and that is not part of the typical training, is I've had to add a lot of psychoeducation. again, I try to do it little bit by little bit. I don't teach a class, but as situations arise, I say, oh, so this is your brain doing this, or, oh yeah, that makes sense, because sometimes I'm more direct and specific. That makes sense because when you have ADHD, the way you perceive time is now, not now, and I can maybe sometimes explain, but as much as possible, I try to weave it into my reflections. I add structure in the sense that I can do all the EFT I want, and it can be beautiful and amazing in session. And of course, it will be sometimes because it's interesting and it's challenging and it's new, right? You discover something new for your partner. So you may have an ADHD partner that's very present in the session, and then they go home and symptoms happen. And so I like to tell my couples, okay, well, we need to minimize the manifestation of symptoms at home. So one of the things is, if they're open, I encourage the ADHD partner to go and seek, well, first of all, a diagnosis, and then to seek help for their ADHD. And the non-ADHD partner, I encourage them to educate themselves about ADHD so that they can team up, but each has their own responsibility. And then I add structure by saying, for example, I think it would help you to have a meeting once a week, or you plan the week and you anticipate together what is important this week, who needs to do what. You need to have a system, a reminder system that only one, not like 1,000 apps and 1,000 agendas and sticky notes everywhere, but one common agenda where you can see each other's schedule and you can have the reminders of what needs to be done when, and maybe set one goal a week, one small achievable goal. For example, because you can't ask the non-ADHD partner to let go of all control all at once and say, okay, now you're in charge of the meals. That's not going to work, right? Maybe we start with, it would mean a lot for me if one time a week you could take care of this task. And then I encourage them to map out, what does that mean, take care of this task? For example, if you're going to cook a meal, who shops for the meal? Who does the grocery shopping? When are you going to do it? So that you have the ingredients on the day that you said you were going to cook. What time are you starting if you want to eat at this hour? And so it's like practicing adding the strategies, practicing, okay, remembering it's hard to anticipate. So if you say, yeah, I'm cooking dinner, that's fine. But then you come home from work at 8 and there's still nothing that's ready because they didn't anticipate it takes an hour for the meal to be ready. So I encourage, and sometimes we do a little bit of that at the end of the session, like practicing thinking, anticipating together, and having that time during the week where they can plan ahead together. Adding those external strategies, so that's one of them. It can be, for example, with the cycle, some of you already do that with your couples, but give a name to your cycle so that you can stop it, right? And so when there is impulsiveness, it's super important to have a very, very clear strategies, a keyword, an object, something they can hold that's super clear, to try and say, hey, we're stuck in the cycle. Or even the notion of subtitles, put the subtitles. Remember, your partner cannot read your mind. Stay flexible in the sense that it's not going to be your textbook EFT sessions. You may get lost in content. It may go all over the map. Or you may have to take breaks. You may have to let them stand up and walk around. You may need to make shorter sessions, give them little fidget toys to play with, adapt to the needs that are there, okay? And also, you need to refocus, interrupt, bring them back, You're going to have to do that a lot in some cases if you want to get anything emotional going on. Be careful to keep your systemic lens. Don't pathologize. It's easy to see the ADHD partner as the problem, but we want to make sure that we see the dynamic as the problem. And yes, maybe sometimes the symptoms are the trigger, but how the partner responds to the symptoms is also problematic. And then they each have a responsibility. The ADHD partner is the only one that can take care of their ADHD. They're the only one that can take the medication or apply the strategies. And when they don't, then that's a clear, for the partner, it's a message of I'm not worth it. You're not going to do that for me. And it feels helpless, right? So the best love declaration they can give their partner when we're talking about all of this is, I'm going to take charge of this. I'm going to do my best. I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm going to do something about it. And for the non-ADHD, they need to learn, to commit to learn to communicate more calmly. And what will help them do that is having an understanding of ADHD. So educating themselves is their responsibility. And then I think this is my last slide. No, almost last. Grieving is so important, right? And grief is there. It's part of the deal. It's hard to realize, oh my gosh, what would my life be without it? If I didn't sign up for that. Or the kind of grief that says, oh, had we known, this is what I felt, had we known how much pain we could have avoided, right? But we didn't know, and we hurt each other so much in the process. And it's important to create a space that you will see grief come up. And it's important to create a space where it can exist. Because once they learn to let go of what is not there, they can maybe start living and celebrating and appreciating what is there. And what is there is a lot of good stuff, right? There are a lot of strengths that come with ADHD. There are a lot of gifts. Relationally, ADHD people who have ADHD are very, they're forgiving. Some of them struggle with that because they hyper focus on an emotion, but generally speaking, they forget, so they forgive. That's a good thing. They're really inspiring and entertaining. They're fun. They can be sensitive often. They're spontaneous and flexible. They bounce. As I said, they found real solutions in real time. They are passionate. Basically, I like to say my husband puts the music and the color in our life. Right? We're always going on a new adventure, trying new things. And if it was just me, I would have never moved to the US. I would have never lived there for 12 years. I would have never tried surfing and snowboarding and sailing, and I would have never dared, right? So that my life has expanded because of his personality and his ADHD. And also they're very creative and visionary, and they can move mountains. They can make great entrepreneurs, and they're excellent in crisis. So that's just a very short list, but it's important to keep that in mind. It's not just a difficulty, not just a challenge. It's also, for some, it's their superpower. And when couples come to us with the presentation of ADHD, they're not able to celebrate that. Right? But when you de-escalate them and they can put the subtitles and understand each other and make room for each other's experience, reach out and respond. In stage 3, you can start celebrating the gifts with them after you've helped them grieve for what is not. Whew, that was a marathon. So I hope I have, there's so much to say about this topic. This was a challenge. It's always a challenge to present everything in such a short time, but hopefully I've given you a bit of a glimpse. Ben and I teach a 2-day masterclass. If you speak English, we're doing that in May, and the information is in the PowerPoint, and Norma will send you the PDF of the PowerPoint so you can have it. If you have any questions or any comments that will not have time to be addressed, you can reach me here. You have my email address. I'd be happy to answer if I'm able to. And we have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Alexine. It has been great. There are people that come in and has to move out, and they thank you a lot for this presentation that is excellent. I have here a question that someone left. What happened when there is no diagnosis? How can we know how can we know if in the couple is there an attention deficit disorder or more in lack of interest?
Well, so I think you can't diagnose ADHD based on it's only based on a parent's lack of interest, right? I think it's about the first slides that are called understanding the symptoms. If you will start recognizing some of those elements, like, oh, interest-based nervous system. Like I didn't have time to show you one of the tapes, but at a session, my first couple, he started saying things like, oh yeah, I don't know why, but sometimes she says, oh, I want to do this, and then suddenly I change the plan because this other thing seems more interesting to me, and then I'm supposed to, she's asked me to do this one thing for this one phone call for a month, and it's really important, but I don't do it because suddenly something else comes up and it's more interesting, or I forget that she told me to do this, or, you know, there were several elements, and then I go like, do you mind if I ask a few questions? Like, what you're saying is making me think of a few things. I'd like to screen for that, if that's okay. And then I started asking questions, right? Are you struggling to stay focused at work? Do these things happen in other settings? Do your thoughts sometimes go all over the place? Do you struggle to focus? And then it was like, yes, yes, yes. And then suddenly I said, do you mind if I keep asking questions? And she says, ADD. And so yeah, I think differential diagnosis is super important. And I wouldn't diagnose based on one symptom. I would just explore, is this true in other settings, not just in the relationship, etc. Yeah.
Thank you.
I see hands raised on the two.
There's 2 hands raised.
Can you say the names, because?
Yes, you don't have their name.
There's a name that says VMTGHO.
Yes.
Velvet, yo.
Yes.
Velvet.
Okay.
Me parece muy interesante todo lo que has planteado. Tengo varias preguntas.
So hold on. How do I hear the?
I am going to translate.
You translate.
She has some questions that she's going to ask right now.
En la experiencia tuya con parejas donde un miembro es TDAH, ¿cómo estos síntomas disminuyen con la medicación? Porque la medicación es muy eficaz. Entonces, tengo la impresión de que mucho de esto debería disminuir mucho con la medicación, pero no lo sé, porque yo no tengo la experiencia.
I understood. Yeah.
Okay.
If medication diminishes the symptoms significantly.
Yes.
Yeah. Not always, but you will see a better ability. ADHD medication is very efficient. And there's a lot of myth about it, that it's not good for your brain. But there are a lot of myths. It's not addictive, and it's very efficient. But sometimes you have to look for the right kind of medication. But it helps with distractibility. So it helps focus on a task, get started on a task, finish a task, remember things. Those you will see a significant improvement. I think it's harder with impulsiveness and emotion regulation. It's harder to see results. But anything that has to do with the distractibility, for some people, it's like night and day, right? When they don't take the meds, they can't do anything, and they take it and they feel like they're on a train and they're just like doing their job. Right?
And have you found,
Imagino
Alexine,
que cuando los consultantes, cuando el paciente TDAH no está diagnosticado, aparece toda esta dificultad en la pareja y el ciclo, y entonces es importante para el tratante tenerlo como en mente, porque si no está diagnosticado, no está tomando medicación, entonces el ciclo está completamente activo. ¿Ya? Ahora, una vez que toma la medicación, de alguna manera el ciclo, yo me imagino que se activa igual o se activa los días en que no toma la medicación, pero la intensidad debe disminuir bastante.
Okay, wait a second. Una cosa es que normalmente cuando toman medicación, no es que el ciclo va a bajar, es que la persona está en capacidad de poder controlar un poquito mejor sus impulsos y estar más disponible, responder mejor y mostrarse más involucrado. La medicación ayuda a que la persona pueda estar presente en la sesión y trabajar mejor en las sesiones de psicoterapia.
Pero también en su vida misma.
Yes, en todas las cosas de su vida. She was asking that maybe when one person is not diagnosed, then a lot of things are happening. And when he took the medication, then things got better. And the cycle maybe is less active. And I was trying to explain her that I think, okay.
And it's where you said, yes, it can, I mean, it diminish if the symptoms are controlled, there are less triggers, and then the cycle can be less active. But that doesn't mean the cycle disappears. But definitely, I think medication can make a big difference for the person, but also for the relationship. And so you will see also couples where the partner starts taking the medication and then they feel better and then they stop. And then the partner gets really upset. Why did you stop, right? If you taking your medication means you care about me, means you see the impact it has on me, but you not taking it hurts me, right? But it's not everything. Medication is not everything. They still need to work as a team and learn to fight the cycle together. Just recognizing that ADHD is part of the cycle.
Okay.
Iliana?
Hi, thank you so much for your
Gracias.
It was really helpful. And my question is, well, I have a lot, but maybe I won't have time to ask them. So my question is, like, for example, you mentioned how with impulsivity, it can be harder, even if there is treatment, even if there is coaching, even if there is psycho ed. So I guess how would like a realistic outcome, or how would you do repairment, or how would you handle when, even if they are aware, even if they are working so hard, they are unreachable or impulsivity comes in? How would they work with that or handle it or repair it?
So this is so complex, and it can be really hard when impulsiveness is there and it's hard to stop. So I think if it's too damaging and too intense and too hurtful, it's also okay to talk about what can the non-ADHD partner do to take care of themselves, right? And that might mean, well, when you can't find the breaks and you're ramming into me, I'm gonna remove myself, right? I'm gonna take care of me in those moments, because when we are in that moment and I cannot do anything to get your attention, to stop you, to slow you down, then I need to protect myself, right? And I think that's okay. Sometimes that's what we have to do. And then we work on the repair in session, going back, slowing it down in session afterwards, and trying to slowly develop that awareness. I keep trying to develop clear signals. How can your partner get your attention when you're in that train or that Ferrari and you can't find the brakes? Is there anything they can say that will not be threatening and that will help you hit the brakes or stop you or slow you down? And we have to sometimes just kind of be very practical and get creative together, right? Have them come up with something and try it. And maybe they try and it's not working, and then we fine tune. But it's not, it's a process. And sometimes, I used to work with a couple where nothing worked. So then it was about, okay, then just separate, like move to another room. And when the amygdala has calmed down and when the nervous system is regulated, then you go back and you repair.
Okay. And I guess that will be the case too when they are unreachable, right? Like when they may be like for example, in that example you mentioned about your husband being unreachable because of course their phone was off or something. They would need to repair and I guess come up with strategies to making sure that won't happen or
Right.
how does that look like?
That's a very good point. The repair is not enough, right? Because you can repair like we do in EFT, and with a neurotypical couple or like a regular couple, that the repair can be enough. And I really see your pain and I feel it, and I see my pain in your eyes, and now I know, and you will take care of that. But when you have ADHD, it can be very sincere in the moment. And yes, I feel your pain and I see it and I don't want you to suffer and I'm not going to do it again. But the problem is this is now. And then in 3 days, this moment is not now, is no longer now. And I may forget again, right? So it's not enough to repair. You need to add the strategies. How are you gonna remember that the next time? What are you gonna? I ask my husband all the time, can you please do that? Yes, I will. How are you gonna remember? Right? And we do that together. Like, how I want to let it go. I want to trust you. I want to rely on you. But help me here. Show me how you're going to do it. Because if you say yes, 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 and I trust you, and then I'm let down, we're back in the cycle, right? I'm going to get angry. And so repair plus strategizing to correct, to change to develop new habits around it.
Okay, so I don't know if there's time for another question. If not, I can maybe email you.
It's okay. I'm okay staying. I don't know about Norma.
Okay, no, it's okay. Another question, and then we end. And quiero invitarlos, I'm going to say this in Spanish. Quiero invitarlos, ahora se los voy a pasar por el chat del conversatorio. Les voy a pasar la información del próximo curso también que van a dar Alexine y su compañero, y Ben, que va a ser en mayo. Y quienes hablen inglés pueden participar de esta y vamos a estar en conversaciones con Alexine para ver si lo podemos dar nosotros también en español con Ben y con Alexine en línea. ¿Sí? That sounds good, Alexine, to do it in Spanish later on.
Entiendo. Sí, sí.
Okay. Okay.
So I guess this is maybe a complex question, but like, could you maybe name like what are like the outcomes of every stage in the EFT process, or like goals or milestone we need to work on?
That would take me a while, but I think same, like we work on de-escalation, but also understanding. Stage 1, de-escalation, but also knowledge, understanding of ADHD, and structure, like strategy, scaffolding. I call it the scaffolding, the structure that will be put into place that will protect the EFT work. So by end of stage 1, I hope that there's a treatment plan, whatever that is. I hope there's a weekly meeting, and I hope they know about ADHD and that they're starting to put strategies into place and so that we can do stage 2 safely. Right? Because if we try to do stage 2 and there's no structure protecting the work, and there's no new habits, no way of remembering the important stuff, that's dangerous.
Okay.
Right? And then in stage 2, we do the withdrawal re-engagement, the pursuer softening, while continuing to implement strategies and structuring, and also remembering that it's trial and error, and it's small achievable goals, so that we can have corrective experiences that build the trust and the safety. That said, it's harder to get there when there's ADHD, because you will have a lot of relapse, right? So it's important to keep in mind, like, it's okay, like there will be relapse, it's normal, right? It's not intentional. Let's walk slowly, small achievable goal, and when it fails, let's not judge. Let's just get curious. Oh, what went wrong? What was missing? How can we better improve this? Right? And then stage 3, celebrate, grieve, celebrate.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
God, it was a marathon, as you said, but wonderful. I think that everyone is really happy, and having a view around this, Alexine, is going to help us to work better with our clients and understand how they are struggling. And even though it's hard for them, also for the partner is a difficult thing to stay there, and out of love and understanding, as you say, things can be worked out.
Yes.
So there's
Yes,
hope.
there's hope. There is hope, absolutely.
There's hope. Okay, thank you a lot. Muchas gracias a todos por estar en el conversatorio. 1,000,000 de verdad por estar acá, por participar, y nos seguiremos viendo. En unas 2 semanas estará en el canal latino. Y voy a mandar el material al chat del conversatorio. Quienes no están, me escriben personalmente 8840-9474 para entonces incluirlos y poder enviárselos. Alexine, thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank Andres for the translation. I hope I wasn't too fast.
No, Andrés ha sido de verdad divino. Es un colega que trabaja en EFT también, y de verdad nos ha ayudado un montón, nos ayuda un montón. Yo se lo agradezco en el alma que esté aquí con nosotros. Gracias, gracias Andrés, de verdad, de todo corazón.